Talk to the camera.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MCB in Mauritius. My name is Tony Withers. I'm the Chief Executive of the Mauritius Commercial Bank, and I'm with my colleague Raoul, who is the head of our international department. We're here this afternoon to talk about the Africa CEO Forum, which is coming up shortly. It's due to take place next Monday and Tuesday in Geneva, and we are one of 4 diamond sponsors of this event. The reason that we're taking part is that it provides us with a unique networking opportunity to meet the top African business leaders and influential players in the Africa business environment, and it allows us to promote firstly our brand visibility and also our regional ambitions in the African continent. We will be participating and intervening in a plenary discussion, and we will also be providing our viewpoint on Africa's growth dynamics and how the African private sector can contribute towards advancing sustainable economic progress across the continent. We have, along with many others, diagnosed that there's a very favorable business climate in Africa. It has an interesting demographic position in that the average age in Africa is in the low 20s, and this means that as GDP growth progresses in many countries, there are expanding consumer markets, increased foreign direct investment flows, and a higher rate of technological absorption and innovation. So for these reasons, we are looking to develop our business contacts and develop more business across a range of African countries. And Mauritius, which is very well strategically positioned as a gateway to Africa, we think can become an enhanced hub for business and finance and act as a springboard and gateway, importantly, for channeling trade and investment flows between Africa and Europe, as well as Africa and Asia. Mauritius has an ideal time zone for doing international business. It has demonstrated political and social stability, a dynamic and bilingual workforce, an open and market-based economy, and importantly, an investment-grade sovereign rating status. Mauritius also adheres to international standards in terms of regulation and exchange of tax information. It has a reliable, efficient, and supportive infrastructure in terms of its airport and port and internet connectivity. It has a good government-private sector partnership going and a pretty business-friendly fiscal regime. In addition, it has a wide network of bilateral agreements which pave the way for business protection and investment structuring possibilities. Mauritius currently has 46 double taxation treaties in force, including 19 with African countries, and 40 investment promotion and protection agreements signed with 20 African states. Mauritius is also a member of the Southern African Development Community. It's a member of COMESA, which is the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and it also belongs to the Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, and in addition is an observer member of the Eastern African Community. So it's a player in all these major regional economic and trading blocs. Mauritius also is growing its trade at about 9% in total merchandise exports to Africa, and it stood at about 16% of Mauritius's total exports in 2014. And we're seeing growth rates of about 12% and 5% respectively in terms of exports to and imports from the SADC region, the Southern African Development Community region, over the 2005 to 2014 period. So we're seeing increased participation in Africa's major economies and also its special economic zones over the past period. In addition, over 75 Mauritius companies have invested and are successfully operating in 21 African countries in a range of business activities across agriculture, manufacturing, as well as service segments, and especially in the financial services sector. So Mauritius is an ideal country from which to start doing business with African countries, from both an investment perspective and also an operating perspective. Turning now to MCB, we haven't waited for Africa to be in the spotlight as the new place to be. We're a 176-year-old company, and we're well established in a wide range of countries. Excuse me. Foreign sourced income currently accounts for about 45% of our after-tax profits, and this has come about principally through developing strong regional trade finance business lines with a range of banks in a number of African countries. We have subsidiaries in Madagascar, Mozambique, the Seychelles, and the Maldives. We have an associate company in Reunion Island, the neighboring island to Mauritius, and we have representative offices in Johannesburg and Paris, and recently we opened an additional new representative office in Nairobi in Kenya. So that's really the background to why we are participating in the Africa CEO Forum. We sense that as African countries grow their GDP, there is an increasing market for us to expand our letter of credit business, principally related to the import of refined petroleum products. We think other types of commodities can also attract our attention in terms of financing. And of course, we're always looking to reinforce our position in our presence countries. We've developed activities in the bank syndication market and participation in risk sell-down transactions. We're looking to develop our project and acquisition finance activities, as well as our structured trade and commodities financing. And we have also developed a Bank for Banks initiative, which aims at positioning Mauritius Commercial Bank as a regional hub in handling trade finance, cards operations outsourcing, and recently consulting services on behalf of the group's financial and banking counterparts. So in so doing, we're looking to develop our strong relationship orientation. We're looking to share our business process improvements with banks in Africa, show them how to follow sound risk management practices, and all in all, we feel that there is enormous potential for both Mauritius and Mauritius Commercial Bank to develop additional business with Africa. I'd now like to ask Raoul to comment a bit further on some of the things that MCB has been doing.
Thank you very much, Tony, and good afternoon, everyone. As Tony rightly mentioned, MCB did not wait for Africa to become fashionable to start doing business on the continent. The history of MCB and the diversification, the internationalization of our group has been paved with many successes, and obviously we have developed a very strong franchise in the Indian Ocean Rim by assisting our domestic customers to grow their activities outside of the borders of Mauritius. This has taken them to the present countries where we are today, as Antony Withers rightly mentioned: Madagascar, Mozambique, Seychelles, and the Maldives, and obviously our partnership with subsidiary in Reunion Island. But as we grew and as our customers also diversified their activities, we naturally came to the shores of the African continent. And we came to a situation where we had to decide what were the steps we should take to grow our business. And obviously having a physical presence in every of the African states can appear to be a little bit optimistic or complicated, to say the least. So we decided to take the view of developing correspondent banking relationship and extending the network of our correspondent banks on the African continent. We have had through our history the chance to develop ties with about 1,600 correspondent banks all around the world. So it's only naturally that we have been able to grasp some 200 correspondent banks who are now partnering with MCB across some 39, 40 African countries. So naturally, the first step was to develop trade finance activities, because Africa is a continent that imports a lot, exports a lot obviously, but imports a lot. And it is a net importer of commodities and essentially petroleum products. So we thought that doing short-term trade finance, financing trade on the African continent was the best route for us to start a diversification on the African continent. Obviously, this has led us to become one of the key players on the energy and commodity trade finance industry over the past 6-7 years. But we have also been quite active over the past 3-4 years in the syndicated loan market, and we've been participating to loan transactions in many African countries, both on the primary and secondary market, through the purchase of and sale of risk, which are essentially backed by the signing of about 18 master risk participation agreements with top-tier African banks. We have also developed ties with a number of banks to provide them with access to our excess capacity in terms of infrastructure, in terms of cards, outsourcing business, and consulting activities through the Bank of Banks initiatives. We came to the situation where, as we ventured on the African continent, we realized that a lot of the second-tier banks on the continent were looking for a reference partner who was an investment-grade bank to confirm the letter of credit, or to actually develop a much broader type of relationship. And this is how the concept of the Bank of Banks arose. We had already made significant investment in technology, in infrastructure, in our SWIFT capabilities, in our payments infrastructure, in our trade infrastructure. We enjoy some very competent staff who have been properly trained in the trade finance business, and this is how we decided to provide them with access to both our human capital and our capabilities, our technological capabilities. Obviously, there is a strong competition on the African market. It's not as easy to venture on the continent as it was in Mauritius, where we have a long-lasting established position. But we believe that the quality of the product, the variety of service that we've been providing over the past 7-8 years to banks on the African continent has allowed us to develop a very strong franchise. And this is what we would like to showcase in Geneva next week during the Africa CEO Forum.
Thank you, Raoul. We'd be very happy to take any questions that you want to pose at us. I think we have one question coming in. Why has the bank decided to venture into Kenya, and what investment has gone into setting up operations in the country? Well, I think the big picture there is that after South Africa and Nigeria, Kenya is the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, and it has good gateway connections to many countries in Africa, and it's also seen many international organizations setting up in Nairobi. So it seemed to us that having already established a representative office in Johannesburg in South Africa, that Kenya was probably the next best city to look at establishing a representative office, and that's what we've decided to do. In terms of the actual investment involved, it's not that extensive. Clearly we needed to find a suitable office, and the staffing of that office will be 2 or 3 people to begin with, although we will be looking to expand this as time progresses. A representative office is in essence a listening post, and it also enables the representative there to maintain much closer and stronger links with all, not just the banks in Kenya, but with a range of neighboring countries. And what we're looking for is leads and referrals and really just quality information on what's going on in the banking scene and the broader business scene in that part of Africa. I don't know whether you've got anything to add on that.
No, I think this is quite comprehensive, Tony. The key objective is obviously to position ourselves on the trade finance and the commodity spectrum, because there is a lot happening in Kenya. Kenya is also the gateway to the Great Lakes countries. It is the gateway to a lot of the neighboring SADC and COMESA countries. So for us, it made all the necessary sense to after Johannesburg to be positioned in Nairobi. We are thinking of giving a much more trade-oriented focus to the Nairobi office compared to what we would be doing in Johannesburg. So for us, it is going to provide the bank and the other entities of MCB Group the choice of deciding whether they would like to use Johannesburg or Nairobi as a landing base for the various activities that the group will have to develop, be it the private bank or the capital markets, or more likely the commodity trade finance and the structured asset-based financing activities.
We have another question that's just come in. Can we elaborate a little bit more on the Bank of Banks services we provide? I think that's one for you.
Yeah, well, the Bank of Banks originally started after a visit in Switzerland, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the bank who has a similar concept, which is a little bit not quite the same as ours, but we had no paternity right over the concept. But the bank, through its history, has developed so much, or has invested so much in infrastructure, in human capital, in training, in technology. We have signed so many agreements with correspondent banks in terms of clearing. We have invested in trade finance, in providing with our staff with all the necessary qualifications, that we felt that we could provide those services to the African banks. And the best way for them to see or to be able to understand what we were doing was to invite them to come to Mauritius and to see exactly what is it that we would be offering. So this is how we launched about 6 years ago the Africa Forward Together seminar, which is a residential seminar that we host in Mauritius every year. Unfortunately, last year, because of the Ebola contagion, we had been obliged to not to organize it. But over the past 6 years, we were hosting some 50 banks every year in Mauritius, and we were showcasing all of the services that we would be able to provide them with. And that encompasses, obviously, all the trade reissuance products, all the cash management services that any international bank provides to any other international bank. But we extended the provision of services to cards outsourcing. The MCB Group is a partner with a Moroccan entity, HPS, and we actually provide complete outsourcing service to banks on the African continent. To give you an example, there's a bank in Ghana who has completely outsourced the whole management of their ATMs and the issuance and the management of their debit cards. And we provide the service to this bank at a level where the volumes that we are actually handling are more than 2 or 3 times the volumes that we are handling in Mauritius for the MCB, for the whole population of Mauritius. We have also developed our own consulting arm, where we actually provide information technology advisory services to the banks who want to go through radical change of their IT infrastructure. And all this is being provided by staff of the MCB who have a dedicated mandate to assist the African banks to grow. And as they will grow, we start from the premise that they will carry on doing business with MCB as a privileged partner. So in essence, this is the concept of the Bank of Banks.
And MCB as a regional bank is with I think the number 25 bank in Africa. So we have $7 billion of assets. We have a market capitalization of $1.5 billion. We're regarded as a large, successful, universal bank by many African banks in many countries. And yet we're not so large that we can't relate to them on a personal level and build strong relationships. And I think Mauritius's membership of the various economic groupings that I mentioned earlier, SADC, COMESA, EAC, and the Indian Ocean Rim, also helps because it's an entree for both MCB and Mauritius to talk to African banks and share with them the experiences that we've had to get us to where we are today. We have another question from Nation Media Group. Are there plans to establish a subsidiary in Kenya or East Africa, and if so, how soon? Well, we don't have any immediate plans to establish a subsidiary in Kenya or within East Africa. We'll see how the new representative office gets on, but we will keep the position under review, obviously, as we look to increase the business that we're doing with African countries. I think that's all we can really say on that question. We have another question. There are huge opportunities for retail banking in sub-Saharan Africa. Are you also looking at that? And could you buy established banks in some African markets? If yes, which ones? Well, I think this goes back to the question that we've just answered about presence. We're not looking to buy established banks in African markets at the current time. But having said that, we think our retail banking business in Mauritius is a very successful operation. It's one of the core parts of the bank here. We have a very strong market share of the order of 45% of lending and deposits in Mauritius, and we think that gives us an insight into how to develop retail banking. It's reasonably widely known that only about 20% of people in most African countries have a bank account. Clearly, the experience of Safaricom and M-Pesa in Kenya in developing their mobile banking platform is bridging the gap between the 80% who are unbanked and the 20% that have a bank account. But clearly, perhaps through our consulting arm and perhaps through our own relationships with correspondent banks, we have insights to offer on how to develop the retail banking platform, which is changing rapidly as a result of technology and the digital banking application related opportunity that exists as smartphones begin to come in a wide range of countries. The interesting thing about Africa is how mobile phones, smartphones, are still growing rapidly. I think mobile phone penetration, which is still predominantly 2G, is around 70%. So that contrasts quite markedly with the 20% bank account penetration on the retail banking side. And I think there is a real opportunity to provide advice and help to a wide range of banks as they look to develop their retail banking proposition.
And more certainly, if I may, that almost all, if not all, of the banks that have been attending Africa Forward Together over the past 6 years have had the chance to visit our retail network, have had the chance to see how much investment in technology and how much innovation we are offering today to our retail customers. And it is known, and the feedback that we've had from those African banks is that they haven't seen such a technological breakthrough in the retail space in their own countries. So clearly, even if we don't have a presence, we can add value to those banks who are eager to develop themselves on the domestic markets.
We have another question, a brief overview of MCB. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're a regional bank with the dominant bank in Mauritius with a market share of 45%. We have total assets of $7 billion, a market cap of $1.5 billion. We have 2,500 staff. where we have subsidiaries, as Raoul mentioned earlier, in the Maldives, Seychelles, Mozambique and Madagascar, and an associate which we own jointly with Société Générale in the neighbouring island of Reunion. And we're a full-service bank with a strong retail banking proposition, very strong corporate banking proposition. We are the main go-to bank in Mauritius, as you would expect. We have a strong cards department, which is also handling our digital platform here in Mauritius. And obviously, with Raoul sitting next to me, we have a very strongly growing international proposition as well, using the bank's balance sheet to develop both off-balance sheet fee income opportunities as well as lending opportunities outside Mauritius. I hope that gives you, in a nutshell, a picture about MCB. We have another question. What are potential African countries for MCB to enter, in what capacity? Well, depends how you define enter, and as I think I've answered the question earlier, that we're looking to primarily conduct business from Mauritius with the help of our representative offices and our bank-for-bank strategy. The bank-for-bank strategy is focused on top 5, top 10 banks in about 60 countries, with a strong emphasis on about 20 countries. And this has led to our trade finance business now contributing about 10% of the bank's profits. As I said earlier, this is related to the import of refined petroleum products into a wide range of African countries. And it's perhaps worth dwelling on this very strong correlation between GDP growth and energy growth. GDP growth is around 5% in a wide range of countries, so that means energy growth is 5%, if not more. And Africa still has a long way to go in terms of electricity consumption to start catching up on the developed world. Per capita consumption of electricity in sub-Saharan Africa is just 500 kilowatt hours per year. In the US it's 13,000. In Japan it's 8,000. In Europe as a whole it's 6,000 kilowatt hours. In China it's 3,000. And again, there's a very strong correlation between electricity consumption and sustained GDP growth. So there's an enormous opportunity to help provide greater electricity power generation and therefore consumption in Africa, and we look forward to playing our role in that. Another question has just come in. Can you elaborate on your tech advisory services for banks and your plans in that sector? Yes, indeed. Last year we set up MCB Consulting Services, which is a separate company from the bank. It's owned by our parent company, MCB Group. And this is developing advisory assignments with a predominantly focused on banks in a wide range of countries in Africa. And this is the vehicle. So they pull together resources from the bank, and they are also accredited partners of Temenos, which is the provider of the bank's core banking platform, and with Oracle, and with Geom, and with one or two other companies. So they are pulling together a proposition that enables us to advise banks not just on IT, but also on how to up their sophistication and with compliance, with internal auditing, and just generally help banks develop their own capabilities as regards growing the business in their own country. So it's relatively early days, but it's this consulting subsidiary that we have is doing extremely well, and again we sense there's a huge potential demand for its services. I hope that answers your question. We have another question. Why did it take long for the bank that considers itself the largest in East Africa to have a presence in Kenya or East Africa? Well, I think the answer to that question is that we have been focused on traveling from Mauritius to East Africa. And we've been able to do that very successfully and develop our international business very strongly. It's been growing at strong double-digit rates over the past 5 to 10 years. And we've been able to do that without either having to look at an acquisition or establish a representative office. But we now have a critical mass, we have scale, and we now want to develop the business lines that we have, predominantly revolving around trade finance. And we think we can do that quite successfully by building the team here in Mauritius and traveling, but with the benefit now of a representative office in Nairobi. We have very strong relationships with banks in Uganda, in Zambia, in Tanzania, in Kenya, and neighboring countries, and we think that that is the route for us to continue developing our business. We favor organic growth. We feel that the bank is quite skillful at developing its business lines, and we just don't see the need as yet to establish a stronger presence. We think we can handle all the business opportunities essentially here from Mauritius.
And our philosophy has been that of a partnership with banks with whom we have been dealing with for the past 10-15 years on the African continent. On top of the Bank of Banks initiative, we have favored the route of providing them with all the necessary skill sets and infrastructure and tools for them to grow, to do more business with us, rather than coming and competing on their own domestic markets.
I hope that answers your question. We have another question. How would you respond to people that would say a Mauritian bank can't be a financial hub gateway for Africa? And is there truly an African country that can be a financial hub for the whole continent? Well, I think the answer goes back to some of the information that I mentioned earlier, that Mauritius has for years acted as a hub for foreign direct investment into India and China. And now that investment flows are starting to go into Africa, the network of double tax treaties and investor protection agreements that Mauritius has already in place, along with an infrastructure in Mauritius of banks, accounting, legal support services, and an offshore banking industry. There are over 30,000 what we call global business companies already established in Mauritius that act as vehicles for these investment flows. We think position Mauritius ideally as a hub for investment into Africa as its investment needs become more compelling to build its infrastructure. There are not many other countries that have those credentials that I've just outlined. So I think Mauritius is ideally positioned, and when you add to that the bilingual workforce, the ideal physical location in terms of being only 1 hour behind or 2 hours forward, as it were, from Europe, or 3 hours forward from the UK. In summertime, it's an ideal geographic location. It's a politically stable country, and as I said, it's got this established apparatus to facilitate foreign direct investment that is not matched by any other country that I know of. So in a way, the position that Mauritius occupies is very similar to the position that Singapore occupied in respect to Southeast Asia 15-20 years ago, before that region started to take off, if you will allow the analogy. We have another question. If banks in Africa are looking for structured financing for oil and mining deals, is that something MCB could get involved in? I think that's one for you.
Clearly for oil, this is something that we already do. We've been financing, we've been structuring, we've been participating into some structuring projects on the African continent. Mining is a different business. It's a little bit more complex, or we see it as a little bit more complex. But clearly the energy and commodity on the African continent is an industry that we are looking at. We are currently in the process of finalizing a significant exercise of defining the risk appetite of the bank for the forthcoming financial year, and I'm just about to finalizing it to present it to our board. But clearly, energy and commodity is a key element of the growth of our international business over the next few years on the African continent.
That was the last question. Thank you for your interest in MCB.
Thank you.
Good, thank you too. Thank you for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you in Geneva next week. Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.